Welcome back to the Quick Focus Blueprint program, and I'm going to jump right into this because today is your day. And so we talked about so far and just mentally rehearsed this together as you and I are having this conversation, and this information is becoming part of you. You've been meditating on it, you've been practicing it, you've been putting in your comments, you've been very active because we know learning and focus is not a spectator sport. We talked about a focus journal and your GPA, your big focus, goal, purpose, and action, and all the action steps that we're talking about every single day, right? We talked about it's good to have a to-do list. It's also good to have a not to-do list because some of the most successful, focused individuals, they are very clear of the things that they will not do, and that opens up time and attention for things that they want to do and need to do. We talked about the Pomodoro technique, 25-minute, which is setting up a timer on your phone and taking 5-minute brain breaks. We talked about some of the good focus foods and the foods that are actually detrimental to your focus and concentration. We talked about other things that are distracting, like negative thoughts and beliefs. We talked about sedentary lifestyle and how important it is to exercise to have better focus. And we talked about people. And so that makes a big deal because who you spend time with is who you become. And you want your focus friends, and you want your mastermind, and you want to get a coach to be able to support your biggest dreams, goals, much like I am your focus coach, but if one of your goals is physical or financial, or it happens to be career oriented, you want to find an appropriate coach. And so we've talked about all those different things, and going from people, next I want to go into place, because we know that few things affect your productivity, your focus, as much as what we surround ourselves with, right? That just makes sense. Yet most of us rarely take the time to step back and really analyze our work environment, the environment that we want to learn in, the environment we want to study in, the environment we want to prepare and work in, right? So instead, we do have like a default with a lot of our life because we haven't made it conscious. And I think a big part of transformation is taking the unconscious and making it conscious so you can be aware of it. And then once you're aware of it, you can make changes because you have that responsibility and that power. But instead, most people default to set it and forget it approach to their environment. It just happens to be whatever it was set up to be, and that's where they are. But we know we could transform our environment and transform our internal world. There's a book out there that I always recommend books because I'm an avid reader, and I think it's very important to be able to maintain your focus and fill your brain and mind with positive things that are empowering. There's a great book called Organizing from the Inside Out. Organizing from the Inside Out, the foolproof system for organizing your home, your office, and your life. And so we know that your outside world is a reflection of your inside world, right? When your environment is cluttered, right, how do you feel? But how do you feel when you actually clean your desk, when you clean your laptop, like what's on your desktop? You have clarity of mind, you have clarity of thought, and you have focus, right? There's a long history of creatives and thinkers with cluttered desks, though, right? That's famed. You see these memes on social media where Albert Einstein, and on a very cluttered desk, he says, if a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind, of what then is an empty desk a sign of, right? And so we know that some stimulus for creative pursuits, a stimulating environment, maybe a little bit more cluttered, will stimulate new thoughts in creativity and such. But when it comes to like your work environment, your study, your desk, your closet, excess things in your surroundings can really have a negative impact to your ability to focus and process information and learn and really utilize it. And that's exactly what Princeton University found when they looked at people's task performance in an organized versus disorganized, chaotic environment. The results of the study showed that physical clutter in your surroundings competes for your attention. That just makes sense, right? If you have a lot of stuff in your environment, it's going to compete for your attention, resulting in a decreased performance and also an increased level of anxiety and stress. There was a team at UCLA that observed Los Angeles families and found that all of the mother's stress hormones spiked during the time they spent dealing with all the belongings and all the clutter in their environment. And similar to, we talk about a lot multitasking and what that does to the brain and how it's impossible to be able to switch from one thing to another. Physical clutter overloads your senses and it makes you feel stressed, and it impairs your ability to think creatively, to have peace of mind, to have clarity of thought. So what are some of the things you could do to reduce the clutter in your environment? Because the goal is a clean environment that promotes focus, concentration, and productivity, good levels of performance and high levels of peace of mind. So just a handful of things, and you could write this down in your focus journal. And I would love for you to comment in this section and tell me what your big ahas are. Like, what's the 1, 2, or 3 things you're going to do, because I'm going to give you a lot of things rapid fire that you could do to reduce the clutter and create an environment that really promotes your best, sharpest focus. So I want you to share that, because remember, when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. So the act of sharing it helps you to make it your own. So put that into the comments here, because I want to see which of these quick tips you can help you the most that you're going to apply. Because remember, knowledge is not power, it's only potential power. It only becomes power when you apply it. So here are some useful techniques to be able to manage your clutter and your environment. First of all, you want to apply constraints. I always like this idea of constraints of space, constraints of time, because when you have a short runway, it forces you to concentrate. Remember, this is a focus program, but if you have a certain deadline or a certain amount of space, it forces you to be, number one, have clarity. It forces you to concentrate. It forces you to have creativity, because you don't have infinite amount of time. You have to think out of the box. And it forces really commitment too. So that's why I like constraints. Now, specifically for when it comes to your environment, it's like tabs open on your browser, having a constraint on it, or having it setting limitations on how many notebooks you're going to have, or magazines that's going to be in your environment. That's one of the best ways to stop accumulating things, and having more of a minimal framework that you're filtering for. So if you say, okay, I'm only going to have this amount of magazines on my desk or on my shelf, or open only X amount of browsers, that's your constraint. So it forces you to focus. I would also say that in your environment, no matter how large it is, to also constrain not only the things in your environment, but the space. Right? Parkinson's law says that we fill the time with what's available to us. And so nature abhors a vacuum, so it will fill. Same thing about clutter, right? Less room means less room for clutter. I would say also it's important to review and come back to your environment and just have a quarterly or monthly review or a weekly review of your space, and set time and schedule time to clean, to organize, to discard things every single week or every single month. Because when you set a daily cleanse routine, it's important, because like maybe it's even for your laptop. Once a week at this time on Friday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to clean my desktop at the end of this work, of the work week or the work day, so that you have your to-do items, they don't linger, and you have a clean slate to start the very next week or the very next day, depending on how you cut it. Now, we know that studies have shown how our work habits, whether they're good or not so good, are often related to some kind of external trigger or cues. And we talk about this a lot in our memory enhancement program. So if you've gone through Quick Recall, the master class, we go into depth about creating triggers that spark new behaviors. But researchers are increasingly tying our performance to our surroundings, right? And when we visit the same places, we work at the same desk, we're always being influenced by the same factors, but most people aren't conscious of it. One of our speakers at a prior Quick Learning event, Superhero U event, was Julia Roy, and she talked about the power of setting up environments, because different places for different places of mind, if that makes sense, right? We know that different locations get anchored to certain activities. Our brains love habits, and if we can associate certain qualities with different places, it helps us get into that flow state a lot better, right? They call this task association, that when you're in your work environment, that's only what you do is work in that environment. You don't have entertainment there. You don't do other things there. Just the same thing when we talk about later, we talk about sleep. You don't want to use your bedroom for anything other than your rest and your relaxation, your intimacy time, because if you're using that as a place to study and you're creating that stress, you're associating that to the environment. Does that make sense? Or if you're using it for entertainment, that's not necessarily the best thing ever either. That's why we recommend not looking at screens and watching TV in the bedroom, because if you have sleep issues, those activities get anchored to the environment. And so you want to be able to control that. And so We talked about brains love habits, but certain qualities get associated to different places. And so when we're talking about task association, this is your brain knows when you're in a certain place, you're taking a certain action. So you train yourself to be able to condition yourself when you go into an environment. And this is like, okay, when I'm here, I write. And that's the one thing that you do. And so one of the things is really controlling your devices also. And that's what Julia talked about at our event. She's like, when you have, like, for example, you're an iPad, just use your iPad, have a designated iPad for work, have a designated iPad or tablet for entertainment, but don't mix the two, because like never use your work laptop to do anything other than study and work. Don't use it for entertainment, because you do not want to mix associations and activities, because your brain gets hardwired to go into state through conditioning. So you want to be able to check that. So if you want to create a workplace that's productive, focus on making it easier to do things with these triggers and harder to do the tasks that you don't want to do. One of the people we interviewed for our podcast is Dr. B.J. Fogg out of Stanford University, and he calls this designing for laziness. And he talks about sometimes it's as easy as turning off the phone or putting it in the drawer. So every time you're tempted to check it, you have to go through a more difficult process, a longer process, while other times it might mean unplugging your TV, or putting something in the closet. So you're setting up the environment to win. So make it difficult to do the things that are going to distract you. There was a study done in UC Irvine that shows it could take up to 23 minutes just to recover from one distraction. So it's no wonder that work environments full of social connections and everything else and lots of shiny objects can really hurt your productivity. It's incredibly difficult given the types of distractions in an office. If you work in an office, one of the most effective means of like combating the challenges of distraction is really switching up your work environment, because some people you have limited control over it, right? If there's lots of noise going on and people bothering you, you have to be able to do the best you can with what you have. There was a study done at Harvard Business Review has shown that workers who are able to control their environment, they just have better focus and they perform better. So a few tips on that, I would say and now again, take each of these things and filter it for your own life to see what's doable and what's applicable for you. Some of people listening to this might not apply. So one of the things that I do is I turn off the Wi-Fi. When I'm writing, I turn off the Wi-Fi, and it's really easy to do because when you turn off your internet, you won't change in your workplace, right? You're not moving a desk or changing things around, but it could lead to a big mental shift, right? Because when you don't have accessibility to things that are going to distract you, checking emails, social media, all that stuff, it can make a difference. You control your environment by putting a sign outside of the door to your office or to your home, wherever you're studying, that just says that you're busy. I'm focusing right now, do not interrupt, so people don't bother you. So you control the environment. One of the other things about having a clean environment that's good for focus is also being conscious of the lighting. I could do a whole session on this, but basically lighting can have a big impact on your productivity, when it comes to reading and looking at screens, because your eyes are very sensitive. And so natural lighting is the best. Indirect sunlight is the best for establishing consistent focus and sleep patterns. If you regularly sit in a dark office, try to fix that, right? And then also one of the harms is fluorescent lights. So you could Google that and search about, the harsh fluorescent lights. You want to be able to opt for something that's more conducive, that doesn't really strain your eyes. Another couple quick tips on this is controlling your environment is the sound. And so if there's noise in your environment, then you want to be able to control that, either canceling out the noise, asking people to be quiet, or if you don't control that, you have noise canceling headphones. Or if you want to try music, some people really like creating a playlist that allows them to use like focus music. And we could talk about this a little bit in a future session, but there's certain music that helps to really engage us. According to it was in the New York Times, 15-30 minutes of listening to music, the right kind of music, can help you to regain your concentration. And we're thinking about music that really boosts your mood, increases your productivity, not having lyrics so much, but more instrumental or acoustic music. And so those are some ideas in terms of sound, either canceling out the sound, controlling the environment using music. The last thing I would mention for you is this. It's something about having a focused friend. And we talked about this in a previous session where I talked about how the people you spend time with really affects your focus concentration. And it's called the Hawthorne effect. And basically what that is it might sound counterintuitive to invite somebody into your work environment because it might be distracting. But studies show that being watched while working can lead to productivity boosts. And they call this the Hawthorne effect. Basically, the people will change their behavior when they feel or they know that they're being observed. And that makes sense, right? Like lots of times I will go out of the office. I'll work at a coffee shop, or I'll work at a bookstore, and I'll ask a friend to come along, and I won't really talk with my friend, but my friend is very focused, and he just gets things done. And just knowing that he's sitting at the table with me and we're in flow together, this really relates to subjects they do scientific experiments, but the same basic principle applies. When you invite a focused, productive person to work with you, not actually collaborating with you, but just being in the environment, you might see an increase in productivity and focus in your attempt to be able to be accountable, and your attempt to also keep up with that pace, right? It's like running, having a buddy to run with. And so having a focused friend is something that I would recommend. And so that's what I want you to do, is take this and see which ones resonate. You don't have to do everything. Choose something. And what I'd like you to do is share in the comments your big aha, the one thing that you feel like that you want to employ that's going to make a difference in really creating an focused environment, an optimal learning environment, optimal performing environment where you are sharp, you have concentration, and you're getting things done. Because getting organized is a skill anyone can learn. Anyone can learn it. And with a bit of mindfulness and tweaking, we can create the kind of space that helps us get into focus and flow quickly and more often. I look forward to hearing your results with this, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.